You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with triathlete and coach Karel Sumbal. Karel recently raced Ironman Lake Placid, where he podiumed. Karel was sick in the lead up to that race, so we focus our conversation today on how he managed that illness and the mental tools he uses on the race course to overcome tough situations. I hope you enjoy. Karel, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, welcome. So, I got to see you up in Lake Placid, and we had a conversation. I thought it would be really cool to kind of talk about it here on the podcast. So, in the run-up to Ironman Lake Placid, you fell sick a few weeks before, and, that happens to a lot of people, right? You're in a heavy training block. Obviously, you're stressing your body. Something happens. And can you just kind of talk through what happened with you and how you manage that and how you recommend other athletes manage with, knowing when is it too soon to go back to training? What you should do rest-wise, nutrition, that kind of thing?
About 2 weeks away from the Lake Placid, it was actually Sunday, 2 weeks before the race day, I started to feel that something is not right. And, in my mind, it was probably just from, the past load of training. And, I said to Marnie, my wife, that I just feel kind of run down. And, I did a afternoon swim session, came back and felt really, really weak. So I was like, I'm just tired. And then the next day, I still, didn't feel that great. I was like, I just probably need a rest. So I rested for most of the Monday and then went for easy spin in the evening, and just to kind of move blood and, get me to the better state. And, after, actually during the ride, I felt pretty good. It felt good to move blood and felt good to be outside. But then when I came back, it was really quick. Maybe half an hour, 40 minutes later, I start feeling like, I'm having fever and I don't feel really well, and just, went to the bed, and sure enough, fever, chills and all that, the typical signs of the flu. So, I think the body was just really compromised from, all the previous load and, in the peak training, and it was just vulnerable to get sick. And I think this is something that many athletes may deal with. And, sometimes we have these signs like, I feel sick, and it's just a part of the taper. And so we have to recognize, is it really a sickness, or is it just, a mood, or, the things that your body is dealing with during the taper. But in my case, I haven't been sick for maybe about 8 years. So, and I was always kind of like, proud of like, hey, my immune system is great. I don't get sick, and blah, blah, blah. And this time I was like, it's not right. It's, something is really happening.
Right. And you've done a bunch of other Ironmans and you coach a lot of people. So you kind of would be able to differentiate the difference between sort of the tapering kind of feeling bad versus a real sickness, right?
Yeah, correct. I could tell right away that it is not one of those phantom sicknesses that athletes typically deal with during the taper time, but it was real. And it basically put me in the bed for, the next 4 days. And it was, I was laying in the bed dealing with either fever, high fevers, or chills, and, the whole body ache that the whole 9 yards that comes with the flu, and every kind of small movement, getting out of the bed, and going to the bathroom or eat or drink whatever, you just feel like you have no energy whatsoever.
Right. And I would imagine one of the mistakes people make is of course when you're in the height of the illness, you probably don't want to or can't train, but how do you know not to come back too soon? So like, what was your thought process there to say, okay, I'm feeling good, but I don't want to go there and compromise or get sick again? So like, how did you deal with that?
Yeah. So, even during this time when I was still in the bed, I didn't let it to kind of get on my mind and bother me too much, knowing that the race is coming up. I was like, it is not in my control. I cannot do anything about it. What's in the future, I can just focus on, just get over this sickness, hopefully. And, I'm not one of those athletes that would immediately go to see the doctor and load up the body with medications and antibiotics or whatever, just to seek some relief in these terms. So I try to let the body deal with it naturally, and also use one of my mom's old recipes for a really strong garlic soup, which I believe it helps. But as I was getting better, I really didn't want to rush it, and I knew that it would be the last thing that would help actually. And you never want to just go out and test yourself, or try to find some validation of your fitness, see if it's still there. So the plan was really just when I felt a little better, it was actually Friday. I started feeling a little better, and it's like, what, let me get on the bike, because with even the past experience, I know that whenever you don't feel that great, sometimes just moving the blood, doing some really light activity can help. So I went on the bike, and it's been very, very easy, and I could feel how the body was absolutely empty, but it felt good just to kind of do something, and then each following day I was really just focusing on how I feel that day, and not try to rush the things, and again didn't try to let it bother me that the race is coming up. Now we are almost just 1 week away, and I still have no energy in my body, and just try to do the workout, not really call it a workout, just move blood, get on the bike, easy spin, then on Sunday I did a very easy jog, and again, just not try to validate your fitness, because that's the biggest mistake you can do. You really need to to let the body heal and help it to heal. So typically when you feel good, let's just give it another day or two, just to to make sure that you are really getting back.
Right. And you've said a couple times now that you sort of just focused on the things that you can control and didn't let it kind of stress you out to say, how's this going to impact my race? But for most people, they're going to really stress out, probably even make themselves more sick and defeat themselves on race day, just thinking like, I didn't get that, that last week of training, or I'm going into it weak. I mean, you sort of kind of compartmentalized it and said, that's the past, that happened, and you just sort of were able to kind of manage through it mentally. I mean, what would you recommend for other athletes, ones you coach or not? I mean, are you able not to let it affect you in the future?
Yeah, I was really just try to hold on to all the good work that you did before, because I'm sure, every athlete who trains for the Ironman, there were many months of good work, and consistent work. So just think about all that work that happened, and it didn't disappear. Yes, your body is compromised and you cannot use it and utilize it right now, but just think about all the good work that you have done, and don't stress too much what is happening right now. A lot of athletes in these situations, they also almost bring more stress on themselves by their actions. They go to Facebook and other social media, and they either try to post and looking for sympathy, or posting it just in case something will go wrong in the race. So they have this justifying of the reasoning why I didn't perform. But sometimes it may still stress you up even more. So just do what you can do, and don't waste your energy on things that you have no control over the outcome. So focus on the good habits, such as make sure you get enough sleep, make sure whenever you get out of the sickness and you can eat finally better, make sure that you eat clean and a very good diet that helps you recover. So anything that can help you recover, promote this recovery and the process getting back to normal, that's what you can control. And everything else, it's out of your control. So why would you stress about it? Why would you bring this additional stress to, that stress has already happened due to the sickness?
Right. And you brought up a really good point around, most people, or not most, but some people would, whether it's on social media or just amongst friends or fellow athletes, would go and, put that little bit of insurance policy in there and be like, I was sick, and just in case things don't go well. And it sort of creates that mental path in your brain to give you that out. And one of the things that I just full transparency for the listeners, I saw you the day or two before the race, and you did not say a thing. Like, you'd never mentioned this. You didn't say a thing, and it was not, you are not that type of person. But also at the same time, I think it probably helps you mentally not to create those pathways to say, well, I have an out. And I know you put a lot of pressure on yourself in these races. You always put an expectation of really competing for a podium slot, or winning an age group or something. So it's interesting. Can you just talk about that kind of that mental kind of I guess game or mental focus you have there, that you're not going to let that pathway of excuse creep in?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really important, just like I mentioned before, to try to find some positive things. So, in the race week, when we finally arrive in Placid, and I try to do everything like I would do if the sickness didn't happen. So just like try to have my normal routine, and of course just adjusting the workouts to what I can do. And every day I felt a little better, so that was the positive. So I try to hold on until whatever makes me feel good, or what is the positive of the day. Okay, today I felt better and I was able to go and do my run workouts. And although I didn't feel that great, and I felt like the muscles were not really working the same way or proper way, but I was able to do it, and there was a positive. Or I would meet up with you guys, friends and athletes, and we would have a chat, and it was great to help others and talk about a course, and just to kind of remove yourself from the fact that maybe something was not going on right, or there was a sickness or whatever setback it was, and just focus on on the positive of this whole race experience, and really do everything like you would normally do before any other race, except you shouldn't do it anyway, but you should not really be looking for validation, and try to test yourself, see if it's there, see if the fitness is there, see if I can do this type of the effort or what else. And it was also good that we are surrounded by friends, and I have one friend from Czech Republic who traveled there, and I told him I would help him with getting around and help with translation, because he doesn't speak English. So it was another good thing that kept me occupied during the days leading towards the race. So I really didn't have much time to think about the sickness and what ifs and how I will feel on the race day. Every day felt a little better, and that was a positive thing. And so I was like, hey, you never know what's going to happen on the race day, with all the, race endorphins and, the race environment, anything can happen.
Now let's get to race day in Lake Placid. So, I guess I'm going to jump ahead and spoil the end result only to set the context for sort of, how you had to manage it. So you landed up podium in coming in third place in arguably the most competitive age group there is. So, you had a good day in terms of, you still performed, and although maybe it didn't meet your expectations for time or whatever, we can talk about that later. You did have a good day, but I then want to take a step back and say, okay, so you wake up in the morning, how did you feel? How did you mentally feel? Were you feeling okay? And just walk me through sort of your routine there. And then as you get into each of the legs, just kind of walk us through the race and how did this lingering, health issue kind of play into things?
Yeah, so I would actually take one step back and go to, the day or two before the race. And, typical my pre-race routine is to really getting into the race mind. And, I use some of the visualization, listen to music and just putting myself on the course. By knowing this course, because I have done this race before, it was my very first Ironman. So I could really put myself on the course and just kind of, put me into that good race mood. So in the morning of the race, I woke up and everything was just like any other race. I was you have a little bit of the nerves, you have the excitement, and you are just ready to race. And so that was really good thing. And again, I didn't even for a second was thinking about what happened before, because I was like, this is the race day, this is what I do, this is what I trained for, and I'm here, I arrived. So I take care of myself as far as setting up the last pieces of the transition, putting the bottles on the bike and all that, and then getting ready for the race to start. And the race started with a swim, of course, and it was kind of like a good positive experience for me, because the swim was always sort of hurdle for me and something that I have to work hard on. And this year I could finally see some improvements and, getting closer towards the front of the pack. So, after the swim, I was in a really good mood. I was happy with the swim and it set me in the good mood. So, that's the best way how to start a day. And, even the first, I would say, 40, 50 miles on the bike, I still, felt just like in any other race. I felt good and everything was moving and everything was fine. But then, I started feeling how the energy is really leaving the body. And there was probably some of those, post-sickness feeling, and the body was really empty. And, from then on, it was just really about managing it. And it's, a lot of athletes, they are in the mindset of I need to be holding X watts or X heart rate or chasing these numbers. And for me, doing the race, it's really managing the situation and staying in that present moment. So not really worry about the outcome too much and not stress about it, but really do whatever you can do in this present moment to do the best you can. So once I start struggling on the bike, I could not really control what's going to happen afterwards, but I could control what I can do at that moment. So there was a lot of soft pedaling and trying to get out of this hole. They didn't really help. And then you just manage the terrain, manage the weather, manage your conditions, and it was I could witness other athletes passing me, and I just really try to stay in the moment, knowing that I have done these races before, and it was my 8th Ironman, and I know how long the day is, and anything can happen. So I just basically let myself get to the finish line of the bike, which was much longer than I had anticipated. But as soon as I get done with it, I didn't want to drool over, and I basically forget about it. It happened. There's nothing I can do about it. Yes, I'm much slower than I expected, and but that's it. I cannot be stressing about it anymore. So the next thing is the run, and again, you just have to stay focused and be present. So when I start running, I kind of use that first part of the run. It was the downhill to kind of find some fluidity in a stride, and surprisingly, the run actually the first few miles felt good. And I saw my wife cheering for me, and she said that I think it was 6th or 7th in my age group off the bike. So there was kind of like the positive information. I was like, it's actually not as bad. I thought I would be much down the list, and so that was sort of good. And she also told me, well, the other guys don't look that great. Well, it could be just some of the type of the cheering that she tried to make me feel better, but it can also be true. But in this moment, I took this information like, yeah, I believe that they don't look good, and I'm feeling good. At that moment, I actually did. So I just stay focused on my running and make sure that I'm running well with good form, good posture, good stride, and it was about maybe next 3 miles, and I actually passed 3 guys in my age group. I could see it. Luckily, the age didn't wash out from their calves, so I could see it, and so I could do some sort of math in my head, and so okay, I now should be in the 4th place. It's just it's not bad. It's actually good. So, but then I start heading back to town, and as you know, there are a bunch of hills leading to the Lake Placid town, and then in the town, and again the body just start feeling the same way as it did on the bike, empty, and everything was almost like that cramp-like feeling, and you never know if the next stride is your last one or not, and from there on, it was really just again, managing the condition, managing the situation, and just like I said on the bike, I never care about the paces or any kind of metrics, but always care about try to make sure that I can run with good posture, good form. Although at this stage it's probably not as pretty as it as it should be, but you still refocus on these things that you can really control. Try to run well, and then the pace should take care of itself, or the outcome. And it was I would deal with a lot of demons in my head, but I think that thanks to my strong mind and willingness to stay in this hard bike just for a little bit longer, I was able to get closer to the finish line. And then there was a mile 20, and I passed another guy in my age group, so I moved to the 3rd place, and it was again a very positive experience. Even I was hurting a lot, but I knew, okay, I moved to the 3rd place. I'm in the podium. Wow, that's great. But then comes those hills again to the town, and they hurt a lot. And but for me, doing this race, it was as I mentioned before, that was my very first Ironman race, and I really wanted to come back and see what I can do after a few years of being in the sport, and so the quitting was not an option. The only way how to quit this pain or suffering was to get to that finish line and cross the finish line. So I just basically stay focused on this one goal. Like, as soon as I cross that finish line, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to take any more steps, and it will all go away. And it was just the way how I dealt with it, and finally I get to the finish line, and I was able to stop.
Right. And in terms of what you had left in the tank, I mean, was this one of the deepest you've had to dig to get to a finish line? I mean, it sounds really tough.
I believe so. I think that it was one of the hardest races. I have to really dig deep to, each race is hard on its own, and you always say, yeah, I have to dig really deep. But this particular one, I think I use all the tricks and everything I knew, and even from my past race experience as a cyclist, where you have to deal with situations like that, where you are just about to really get dropped, or you think you cannot do anymore, but you still have that one extra stroke, one extra push that makes you stay with the group or get over the hill and all that. So it's tough to explain what you feel and what the body going through, and some people may not never get to this place. But with all the years of being in the sports, ever since I was a kid, I just kind of trained this system, or trained this this feeling to suffer maybe just a little bit longer. And by no means I don't feel like I would not consider myself as a fast athlete, but I just feel I can suffer a little longer than maybe some others. But it was just I have to use all the tricks I know from the past to get me to this finish line for sure.
Right. I one time heard a guy who was going through the Navy SEAL Hell Week, which is like it's a week long of like basically no sleep and really all the pain in the world. And he said the key for him to get through it was focus on 30-second chunks. So this guy apparently focused on 30-second chunks for a week straight, and that's how he got through it. But in a sense, there is that mental skill here where you're saying, similarly, although, in a different realm, but, you're focusing on just another pedal stroke, or just another, I don't know, get to the next mile marker, or just get to the aid station, and you're able to sort of compartmentalize and not think about the bigger picture. Is that kind of a fair characterization of how you manage through this pain?
Yes, that's very correct, and that's something that many athletes can use in their next races, and you don't have to be suffering like this, but even like that normal fatigue from the race, it really makes no sense to focus on that on the long distance that you are running in this marathon. Oh my gosh, I still have 12 miles to go, or 15 miles to go, or 6 miles to go, or whatever it is. Just focus on the smaller segments, break it into the smaller pieces, and do the best you can managing the small piece. And it can be, like you mentioned, it can be aid station to aid station, but if that's too much, you can focus on the smaller piece. You can look up and there is a light pole. So I'm running from here to that light pole, and I make sure that I do it the best I can. I manage it the best I can. When you get there, you just set yourself a new goal, a new target, and you focus on that task. And that kind of helps you to not really think how much it hurts and how much it sucks and how much longer you have to do it for, and really just focus on these smaller pieces. And, you will get there eventually. And it will definitely help you with the overall outcome than if you just, because it can be really scary if you just think about how long you still have to go, and the brain can quit on you. And when the brain quits, it's the last thing you have. The body can quit, but if the brain is still strong and keep you moving on, you can still keep going and managing it. But so yeah, smaller pieces for sure.
Yeah. One thing I struggle with is on these multi-loop courses. So, Lake Placid's 2 loops of the bike and 2 loops of the run. When you see the signs for the second loop when you're on the first loop. Yeah. So, you're seeing mile 20 marker and you're only on, I don't know, mile 6 or something. Yeah. And it's really hard not to see that and get overwhelmed. I guess you have to ignore it.
Yeah, you really have to ignore it, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And sometimes I just looked at it like, oh, that would be so nice to be here at that point. But then when you get there, it's almost like the positive experience. And okay, I'm right here. I'm on that second loop, and I don't have to see this part of the course anymore. This is the last time I will be here.
Right. And so I want to take a step back, because there are a few things that popped in my head as you were talking through kind of your biking and running experience. One is you said you weren't attached to a power metric on the bike, and you were just sort of going by kind of, I guess, how you perceived your feel and just your effort. That seems like a really useful tool when things go bad. So it's easy to stick to a power number when everything is good, but when things go bad, then you're in big trouble. So it seems like having that skill set of perceived effort really comes into handy in things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can have it as a part of your training, and it's good to use all these new tools and have a power meter, have a heart rate, and use all these metrics, but always put some more objective to this subjective matter. So you want to associate your feeling with what it feels like. And sometimes in the training, it can be, you can be in the middle of the bigger load, and all the previous training will still affect you, and you feel like you cannot just push this X watts, although the other day it was just fine, and today it feels like the zone 3 feels like zone 5. So you just have to readjust and do the best you can. So really be able to use your RP, use your perceived effort, when you need it, and to manage the terrain and the condition the best you can. It will really help you on the race day, because the racing, it's really all about managing the current situations and the conditions that are thrown at you. So if you just blindly stick to the numbers, even if it's it can be perfectly flat course and you stick to power numbers, you may still blow yourself up, because our body are not designed to do one thing, same thing over and over. You will still get tired. So to bring some variation to it, bring some other elements to managing your race, it's very helpful.
Right. And another thing you mentioned on the bike is that you were being passed by people, and you just sort of said, hey, I've got to stay within myself. I'm having, this is the day I'm having, this is how I'm feeling. Ego management is something that, especially newer triathletes, me being sort of one of those in terms of maturity of being a triathlete, is a big deal. I mean, you don't, it's tough for newer athletes to see someone go by them and then you say, oh wait, I should really be stronger than that individual. I have a fancier bike, or I look in better shape. I mean, how do you you're a much more mature athlete in terms of, dealing, you used to be a Cat 1 cyclist, you've now done many Ironmans, but for people you coach, I guess, I mean, how do you help them, or what would you recommend from an ego perspective to sort of say, don't focus on those other people?
The best advice is to check the ego at the door. But no, really, just don't let other things bother you or change your plan, or your capacity, how you train, what you are capable of. So don't do any silly thing. And especially for the guys, when you get passed by chicks, so be it. Maybe she is really stronger than you are. So focus on your own game, and that actually helps with managing the whole race. When even in terms of when you're suffering, when you're hurting, you kind of stay in your own bubble and don't try to change things. That's of course, when you get to more of the competitive edge of your age group, and then you are racing for a podium, you may be forced to start playing this racing game, and you need to take the risk. So for these age groupers who are really there to race and try to fight for the podium, sometimes you need to be able to be willing to lose in order to win. But in the situation of most of the age grouper who you just want to complete and have the best results for you possible, you really need to be realistic, know your capacity, know what you can do with the training that you have done. And don't do anything silly. Don't try to race it in the first hour of the Ironman, because it's a really, really long day.
And then in terms of, since you mentioned age group, podium racing and strategy there, I mean, you talked about on the run passing, you were in 6th place, you landed up being in 3rd place, which based on how you felt is an amazing accomplishment. But, as you're passing people, I mean, did you sort of have to have a poker face there and look strong and not in pain? And, that's sort of a strategy component I'm curious to hear about.
Yeah, that's just another tool that you can use, and it can be, it's pretty easy to learn and use it, but sometimes it's hard in that race, depending how much you hurt to put that face on you. But always try to look the best you can whenever you're passing your competitors, and it can be really empowering, and it can be discouraging to the other racers.
Right.
So, if you if you look at if you remember some of the Tour de France and some of the GC guys there, and can talk about even like Lance Armstrong, you would never see on his face if he was hurting or not. I'm sure it can be other effects to this, including all the drugs and stuff. But to have the face that nobody can really read you if you are hurting or not, it can be very useful too.
So I guess, one final question I have around on the mental side of things is just, you mentioned the visualization and how that is important and played into kind of how you run up to these races. Do you visualize the bad as well? I mean, so going into Lake Placid, you're visualizing, the course, how the day is going to go. Did you visualize the fact you may feel, weak and ill, so that maybe when it came, you weren't so, wasn't a discouraging thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is actually it's a good question, and it's it has to be part of your visualization. You can't be really just visualizing, oh, I'm winning this race and I'm doing this and that, if it's not even in the cards for you, or if it's not really realistic. But for my visualization, I do really include all these elements of okay, I'll be hurting here, and how you deal with it, or how you overcome it, and or how you just keep riding or running or swimming through. So for sure. Or if you are a newer athlete and you struggle with it can be anything that you are afraid of on that race day. It could be changing the flat tire, or having some issues, dropping the bottle with important nutrition, something like that. So you can use it as a part of the visualization, and just like how you deal with it and how you overcome this, or how you fix it on that in that moment. So, and that can be really, really strong, because then if it happens on the race day, or when you come to this place, you already know what to do because you visualized it. So you already been there, and it's a lot easier to taking care of it.
Right. Well, Karel, I mean, one of the things I've heard from many people on this podcast who've done Ironmans is they say, the Ironman distance is more mental than it is physical relative to, half Ironman and other things. And you shared so many tips and so many tools today on sort of how you mentally handled one of your tougher races. So, thank you so much for sharing. I think it's probably one of the most valuable interviews we've had on the podcast so far. So, it's really going to be useful for other amateur athletes trying to figure out how to solve the puzzle of Ironman. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, and happy to help.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.